Khal Drogo was a force of nature. The mighty Dothraki leader, feared and respected across the land, had united his people under his rule. With Daenerys Targaryen at his side, Drogo had been poised to conquer the world. However, in the original timeline, his untimely death had sent ripples through Daenerys' plans for Westeros. But what if Khal Drogo had lived? What if he had survived the wounds inflicted by the wound given to him in the fight with the Westerosi merchant? Instead of succumbing to death, he had joined forces with Daenerys to mount an invasion of Westeros. For Daenerys, the sudden loss of her husband had been a pivotal moment in her transformation. She had gone from a naive and somewhat passive character to a fierce and unrelenting leader. Without Drogo by her side, she was forced to rely on her inner strength and the support of her trusted advisors, such as Jorah Mormont and Tyrion Lannister. But the power dynamic would have been drastically different if Drogo had remained by her side. The Dothraki horde, with its strength and ferocity, could have changed the entire landscape of Westeros. With Drogo alive, Daenerys would have been able to focus her efforts on conquering the Seven Kingdoms from a place of strength. The Dothraki horde, combined with her growing dragons, would have been a force to be reckoned with. The Dothraki, known for their skill in battle and their vast cavalry, would have been a terrifying sight to the people of Westeros. The combination of their speed, agility, and raw power would have created an unstoppable military force that would have made it difficult for anyone to oppose them. The Dothraki, under Drogo's command, would have been united in their loyalty to him. His leadership would have inspired unwavering devotion in his followers. The Dothraki would have fought with unparalleled ferocity and determination, knowing that their leader was strong and capable of victory. This would have been a stark contrast to Daenerys' earlier campaigns in Slaver's Bay, where she had to rely on her own developing strength and the loyalty of her freed slaves. But the conquest of Westeros would not have been without its challenges. While Drogo's survival would have strengthened Daenerys' position, Westeros was no stranger to invasion. The Seven Kingdoms had faced countless foreign threats throughout their history, and the Iron Throne was coveted by many. The Lannisters, Tyrells, and Baratheons would have united against the Dothraki invasion, seeing Daenerys as a threat to their power. Tywin Lannister, with his keen military mind, would have recognized the Dothraki horde as a grave threat and would have sought to use his vast wealth and political influence to unite the Seven Kingdoms against them. The Dothraki would have faced stiff opposition from the forces of the Iron Throne, but their military might was unmatched. The Dothraki cavalry, known for their speed and shock tactics, would have struck fear into the hearts of the Westerosi armies. Khal Drogo, a man who had never lost a battle, would have led his people into battle with an unrelenting drive to claim the Iron Throne for his wife. His presence on the battlefield would have been like nothing Westeros had ever seen, an unstoppable force bent on conquest. As the Dothraki horde swept through Westeros, they would have faced several obstacles, not just from the Lannisters and other noble houses, but from the land itself. The terrain of Westeros was far different from the open plains of the Dothraki Sea. The hills and forests of the Riverlands would have slowed their advance, and the narrow mountain passes in the Westerlands could have been used by the Westerosi forces to their advantage. But with Drogo's leadership and Daenerys' dragons, the Dothraki would have been able to overcome these challenges, using their speed and ingenuity to outmaneuver their enemies. The dragons, which had become Daenerys' most powerful weapon, would have played a pivotal role in the invasion. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion would have been unleashed upon Westeros in full force, burning the enemies of the Targaryen dynasty and clearing the way for the Dothraki to advance. The sight of dragons in the sky would have sent a wave of terror across the Seven Kingdoms, and the Lannisters and other houses would have struggled to find a way to counter the Targaryen threat. Robb Stark, king in the north, would have found himself in an impossible position. Though he had pledged his loyalty to the Starks, Robb had long believed in the independence of the North. The Stark banner would have flown proudly, but Robb would have struggled to decide whether to join Daenerys' cause or stand against her. Jon Snow, too, would have been faced with a difficult decision. Hawk Jon had sworn an oath to the Night's Watch. His loyalty to his family and the Stark cause would have made him a key figure in the North's decision-making process. The North would not have remained neutral for long, and alliances would have been tested. Daenerys and Drogo would have found themselves at the center of a political maelstrom. The fate of Westeros would hinge on their ability to unite the Seven Kingdoms under the Targaryen banner. Robb, Jon, and other key figures would have to decide whether to accept Daenerys as the true ruler or fight against her. But with the Dothraki horde at her back and the dragons by her side, Daenerys' power would have been nearly unstoppable. As Khal Drogo and Daenerys Targaryen led the Dothraki horde southward, the very idea of their conquest shook the Seven Kingdoms. The Dothraki, once only a name whispered in fear, were now a legitimate threat to the Iron Throne. The combination of Drogo's leadership, Daenerys' dragons, and the overwhelming power of the Dothraki army would send ripples through Westeros, forever changing the political and military landscape. Robb Stark, upon hearing of the Dothraki invasion, understood that the tides of war were shifting in ways he could not have anticipated. While the North had long been able to maintain its independence, the southern threat now loomed far too close. Despite his early successes in the War of the Five Kings, Robb was faced with an existential question. Should he resist Daenerys and Drogo, or should he join them in their cause? The Ironborn were already a formidable force, but the Dothraki, led by Drogo, would be an unstoppable military power, capable of devastating any opposition. At the same time, Jon Snow's position beyond the wall grew more pressing. With the North now facing not only the Lannisters but also the might of the Dothraki and Daenerys dragons, Jon could see no choice but to return to the south. His allegiance to his family, to Robb Stark, and to the realm weighed heavily on him. His role as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch was important, but the battle for Westeros was now a much more complicated affair. He couldn't ignore the growing threat to the realm, one that came not just from the south, but also from the east. The Lannisters, still reeling from their defeat at Blackwater and the near collapse of their power, now faced an even greater threat. Tywin Lannister, ever the tactician, knew that if the Dothraki and Daenerys were allowed to conquer Westeros, the Lannisters would be wiped out entirely. Despite the shifting alliances and fractured relationships, Tywin's one goal remained: the preservation of House Lannister. He quickly summoned his allies in the Westerlands and the Reach to form a coalition, desperate to fend off the combined might of the Targaryens and the Dothraki. But even Tywin Lannister knew that their forces could not hold against the sheer numbers of the Dothraki horde and the firepower of Daenerys' dragons. With the Dothraki storming through the Westerlands, the houses of Westeros began to scramble for their survival. The Tyrells, cautious but pragmatic, were quick to offer their alliance to Daenerys, recognizing that the Lannisters were on the verge of collapse. But the Tyrells, despite their loyalty, knew they could never trust the Dothraki horde fully. Their alliance was more of a calculated move to secure their own power than a genuine commitment to Daenerys' cause. In the Riverlands, the Freys and other remaining houses who had previously backed the Lannisters found themselves with no choice but to reevaluate their positions. They had hoped to weather the storm by siding with the Lannisters, but now they saw that Daenerys, with her dragons and her alliance with the Dothraki, was not a force to be trifled with. In this new reality, their chances of surviving depended on forging alliances that would ensure their survival, even if that meant bending the knee to the Targaryens. Meanwhile, Daenerys and Drogo, having secured their place in the south, set their sights on King's Landing. They were not naive. Daenerys knew that conquering Westeros would not be as simple as defeating the Lannisters. The Iron Throne was the seat of ultimate power in the Seven Kingdoms, and the seat she had long dreamed of claiming. But with Drogo at her side, leading the Dothraki, she knew that their forces were unmatched. The dragon's dragon Rhaegal and Viserion would unleash their devastating fire upon King's Landing, ensuring that no stone was left unturned. The city, still haunted by the horrors of the previous siege, braced itself for yet another onslaught. Cersei Lannister, already stripped of her power after the death of her son Joffrey, now faced a different kind of enemy. Her focus had always been on securing the throne for her children, but with the Targaryens marching on King's Landing, she realized that her hold on the Iron Throne was slipping away. Desperate and furious, Cersei considered all her options, but her options were limited. Her family's enemies were now stronger than ever, and no amount of political maneuvering could save her. Jaime Lannister, ever loyal to his sister, was now torn between his family and his evolving feelings about the Targaryens. He had seen firsthand the devastation Daenerys could cause, but he had also seen her potential as a leader. Jaime's path was uncertain, and his role in the eventual Targaryen conquest would depend on his ability to reconcile his past loyalty to his family with the possibility of a new future under Daenerys' rule. Jaime's decision would be crucial in determining the outcome of the final conflict for King's Landing. As Daenerys and Drogo's forces closed in on King's Landing, the people of the city, once hopeful under Joffrey's rule, now found themselves in a new, dire reality. The city was surrounded, and the fate of the Lannisters was hanging by a thread. But Daenerys, for all her strength and ambition, understood the gravity of what it would mean to conquer Westeros with fire and blood. She would not simply be a conqueror, she would need to rule. And ruling was not as simple as sitting on the Iron Throne. Jon Snow, caught between his loyalty to Robb Stark, his family, and his duty to protect the realm, found himself torn between Daenerys and the North. The coming conflict between the Targaryens, the Starks, and the Lannisters would not be easily resolved. The stakes were higher than ever, and Jon's role in the future of Westeros was becoming increasingly uncertain. Would he stand with Daenerys, the woman who had proven her strength, or would he continue his duty as a Stark and fight for his family's survival? With each passing day, the drums of war grew louder, and Westeros was on the brink of a new era. Would Daenerys Targaryen and Khal Drogo succeed in claiming the Iron Throne, or would the fragmented forces of Westeros come together to fight for the survival of the Seven Kingdoms? The future of Westeros now depended on the actions of those who held the power, and the fate of the realm would be decided by those who dared to stake their claim.